the second episode of the President's Perspective. Last time we had our Real Data Strategies founder, Pat Vealing, here with us to discuss the Desert Dynamics tool we have. And this time we have with us our Government Affairs Chairperson, Atiyana Lawson, who is here with us to talk about what happened and what took place while we were in Sacramento. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you here today.
Hi, thank you for having me, Stephanie. I am the chair of the Government Affairs Committee, and I'm so excited to talk about Sacramento. It was an amazing trip, and I have so much to say about it. It's my second time going, so let's dive in.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well, let's get into, we hear a lot of times people say, what is it that my dues pay for? What does C.A.R. and N.A.R. do for me? And I happen to believe that one of the largest things that we do is our lobbying efforts. We make a real impact when we show up in Sacramento and when we show up in Washington, D.C. And this time in Sacramento, we definitely made an impact. There were some bills that were changed before we even got there and some bills that were changed while we were in the hallways. So I think I want us to share that with some of our members so that they can understand a little bit about what it means to be a part of the largest lobbying group in the nation, the Realtor group, the Realtor Party. So let's get into a couple of the bills. I know when we first arrived in Sacramento, we received these little folders that have the hot sheets and the hot issue information. And the very first thing they told us is that the first bill on the first page had already been taken down by the author because it was losing support. And it was something that we opposed. So I want to just talk about that a little bit. Even though the bill has been killed, as we say, I still want us to talk a little bit about what it was, because it was the expansion of extreme rent control. And that's something that's a real concern to some of our investment property owners in the desert. So let's talk about it a little bit. What was the reason, or what was the issue in the background on that a little bit, if you would, for me?
Well, this bill, and you're referring to AB 1157, which was drafted by CALBRA.
Yes.
We strongly oppose this bill because it creates even more uncertainty for housing. Obviously they're applying rent controls that target small rental housing and the providers, and it reduces the housing supply. So immediately, this was one of the hot topics, the key issues that we wanted to take to our legislators to ask them to oppose. And there's so much more to that. And obviously, with over 2,200 agents there in Sacramento for Legislative Day, I know our legislators feel our presence, and this came right off before we even got into those rooms with our legislators.
Yeah, I know one of the big reasons that we were opposing this is that it would undo many years, and I can't remember I can't remember the year Costa-Hawkins came into act, but I know that 30 years.
1995, so the
Yeah, so
30th
30
year,
years.
yes, of protecting.
It was going to undo a lot of those protections, and we have that
Correct.
part of our system is working really well, and so we fought to make sure that that didn't go away, and we were all very glad to hear that. Especially since our new CEO at C.A.R., his father, or
Phil Hawkins.
his father, was the one who helped to start Costa-Hawkins Act. So it was very exciting to be able to be in the room and celebrate 30 years of that. And having that come off of this list before we even got started was really exciting, don't you think?
Absolutely. And hearing Phil Hawkins' background and just what his father went through was inspiring. So yes, 30 years of celebrating the advocacy and protecting those rights.
Absolutely. All right. And up next, 448, SB 448 was regarding squatters, written by Unberg. Let's talk about that a little bit. I know that I got to present on this one with Greg Wallace, and we talked a lot about the fact that we're sponsoring this bill because it creates a clear line for a small investor to be able to evict a true squatter, not someone who has any tenancy rights, but someone who's a true squatter. It really speeds up that process and allows them to have the avenue to remove those people. And again, it's, the larger corporations that have processors and people that work this for them is one thing, but it's really those small investors that were going to be affected by this. And so that is the reason that we're sponsoring this bill. And we got support on it from both Greg Wallace and Jeff Gonzalez.
We
What are your
did. We got it. Well, this is obviously an issue that we have heard about for years, and we definitely need to create legislation and streamline the process to make it allow homeowners, home providers, the ability to get these squatters who truly do not need those protections of tenant rights on their side. So we've heard of many stories of people having issues, especially as realtors, our clients. This particular bill turned out to be a 2-year bill. So we did sponsor it, and we heard from our legislators, Greg Wallace, Jeff Gonzalez, and many more who were willing and excited to support this. It turned into a 2-year bill, and so there's going to be some work to do on this, but definitely something to keep an eye on because it is something that we need in our industry.
Yeah,
And
and I think the fact that this bills like this in the past have failed, and the big reason that this one is successful is because it does put in place protections for tenants who are lawfully occupying a property. That's been a big reason why, again, tenant rights are so important in California, and I know that a lot of our legislation leans in that direction, which is important. At the same time, we have to look out for those small investors because they are the majority of the investors in California. So it's really
well,
important to make sure they're looked after.
and the great part about this bill, it's gonna speed up the process. It's going to define the differences between the tenant rights, and it's not going to make, actual legitimate tenants, it's not going to make their process and their rights, clouded in any way. So this is going to be a great bill. It's going to help a lot of small property owners.
Absolutely. Now, the one that was introduced after the first one that we were fighting was taken off. We got a replacement bill to go in and discuss. And that one, it was so exciting. In the afternoon, we went to go into our afternoon meeting with Jeff Gonzalez. And before we walked in, we were told to cross it off because it had been pulled by the author because he heard that they were losing votes and losing support for it because the realtors were in town and were having conversations with their legislators. So I gotta say, the look on the faces of the first time attendees who were for the first time hearing that we actually made a change in the hallways that day was just so cool. I think the look on my face was probably just as excited as some of those guys too.
Well, I will tell you that was AB 647, and I was actually responsible to introduce that with our meeting in our meeting with Assemblyman Jeff Gonzalez. So when Paul Herrera, our government affairs director, came in and said, by the way, we don't have to introduce AB 647, was, like you said, blown away. I was like, wait, how does that happen? What does it mean? But as you said, with all of us there, we're a powerful voice, and we're advocating. Yeah, it was Gonzalez who was the author. He said, take it off. I'm not going to even worry about this. Like, we're not pushing for it. And by the way, if you guys want a little bit more information on that, that bill was going to allow up to 8 units per parcel. And that would have been insane. Right now, we're allowed 3 units per parcel, which is a home, an ADU, and a junior ADU. And this would have allowed up to 8. So I'm really glad that, all our hard efforts paid off and they pulled this one.
Well, and the challenge with this one is that the 8 units, it really didn't take into account the infrastructure that has to happen when you go from a single family home on a parcel to 8 units. You need more parking, you need more industry, you need more resources. There's all kinds of things that go into. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
especially with the fires that just took place in the Palisades and a lot of those lots being now leveled, if we were to bring in 8 units on each of those lots, imagine the challenge of getting all those people out if there was another fire. That is what really killed this bill, was those conversations taking place about the fact that this had not been thought through as well as it needed to be. There were a couple other bills in support of housing, and that was another thing that a blanket statement that we asked our legislators, that when we're there, we're not there as Republicans or Democrats, whatever our personal alliances are. We're there for the Realtor Party. And we asked for all these bills to be pushed through because they will support housing and help people, specifically with the rebuilds in Palisades, to cut some of the red tape to allow people to rebuild faster, and to be able to have those resources that are needed. So I know it felt really good to be a part of all of that, and it felt really good to be a part of making sure that we're helping things go in the right direction, and that the voice of not just realtors, but of private property owners and small investors were able to be heard there. I know it was important to me, and I know it is to you too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about, there was another bill you were interested that you wanted to discuss with us. That one
Yeah.
was
AB
AB
739.
739.
In
Yes.
our government affairs committee and across the board, this is a bill that has been brought up. It was authored and brought up earlier this year, 2025. This is, I would categorize this, well, I'm calling it the HOA bill. um, this bill is supposed to help create a structure for HOA management companies. There was a lot of pull and opposition on this bill, but it is something that, as realtors, as homeowners, and HOAs, something that's been a really important topic. We've just been following it very closely. It was pulled, and the update right now is it's turned into a 2-year bill. So, from all ends, realtors, HOA management, and homeowners in HOAs have been keeping an eye on this, and it's something to update everyone on moving forward. So, we'll see how that is handled.
Yes, yes, I know everybody's very interested in, at least in the hallways in Sacramento, as we were walking around, you'd heard a lot of people talking about this and what's going to happen with the requirement of real estate licenses or other type of licensing for property management and HOA management. It's a hot topic, and it's something that I know we all look at, and we deal with those HOAs all of the time, so it can definitely be a challenge. So let's talk a little bit about, I don't know, the rest of your experience. I know you are a member of the inaugural class of the C.A.R. Leadership Academy. So we have our own leadership academy at C.D.A.R., which is we'll get into that in a little bit, but a great way to fast track if you're interested in going to Sacramento. Tell us about that. Tell us about your experience in Sacramento and how that felt.
Well, CAR Leadership Academy has been instrumental in my progress. My desires to be involved both on our local level and also on the state level, and doing my part in advocating. I have learned so much. We went to Sacramento, so Leadership Academy had to be there a couple days before, and we got a lot of speakers to come in, both on our state level. We had our president and president-elect, Heather Ozier, Tamara Szyminski, and we got to hear from some of our executive teams at CAR. So just learning the ins and outs of the legislative process has been so inspiring, and really breaking down what that means and what it looks like and how bills get passed. This year was very impactful. I went in 2022 with the CDAR Leadership Academy, and I feel like this year everything just clicked in a way that it had not before. There's just so much to learn and to grasp. But this year, plugging myself in, and I would definitely encourage anybody who's interested to give it a try, check it out, and plug yourself in those committees or those rooms that you are most drawn to. So if you feel a passion for it, I would definitely encourage you to do that.
Awesome.
I walked away with being more inspired than before, and looking forward to doing more on the state level. And if I may, Stephenie, I would like to announce that the CAR Leadership Academy, our state leadership academy, is now accepting applications for 2026. I, like Stephenie said, this is the inaugural class, so I'm very proud and honored to be part of it. But you can be part of the next class, 2026, and just grow and learn.
Absolutely. And for anybody who is interested in getting involved in the political side of what we do, and for anyone who doesn't understand that what we do heavily involves politics, really doesn't understand the full breadth of what we do, right? Getting involved in being at those, whether it's in Sacramento or here at the local meetings, being at the city council meetings when there are real estate issues coming up is really important. And for anybody who's interested in something like that, we have a couple committees. We have our LCRC committee, which is the local candidate recommendation committee. We also have our government affairs committee, which, as we said before, you chair. So maybe can you just tell us a little bit about the government affairs committee and what you do locally?
Well, government affairs, we participate in all legislative government processes, from the local to the state to nationally. We monitor bills, monitor any kind of legislation that is coming up that affects our, not just our real estate industry as real estate professionals, but as homeowners and renters. It affects everyone. So we keep an eye on anything that impacts the real estate market, and we try our best to engage with our local officials. So whether it's meetings with our mayors, our city councils, assemblymen, senators, we try to stay engaged with them to see what they are, how we can support them and how they can support us. So government affairs is pretty exciting. I feel, and well, I know, obviously, just being able to share with you some of these bills, you are on top of what's coming up, and you can educate your clients. You can share the information with your affiliates, your associates, your brokers. So it has been an experience unlike any other. And I would encourage you guys to take a look into it if you guys wanted to get involved.
Absolutely. And everybody should get involved in the way that speaks to them. I'm very glad that this is the way that speaks to you, because we've been honored to have you to be a part of our government affairs committee and to be a part of our travel team for Sacramento. It was wonderful. And again, for anybody who's looking to maybe go to Sacramento with us and take that visit, there's lots of ways to do it, but I think one of the best ways is our local leadership academy. It is a trip that they take every year, is to come up to Sacramento with us and get to see how things work, and what happens. In the last few years, the Capitol building has been under construction, so we've had to have our meetings in a building across the street, and they've all been kind of staggered at different times. So some people haven't gotten the experience yet of marching with 2,000 or 3,000 people down the corridor from the convention center to the Capitol and going in and storming the halls. And it's a really great experience. Again, what we did this last time on this last trip was really exciting, getting to see things that change. I know we even had a meeting with Rosalie C.A. Ochoa-Bogue, and she got pulled away to go into committee. And while we were waiting for another meeting, we're watching her on the TV screens in the committee meeting, arguing and fighting for rights, for homeowners' rights. And it was just very exciting to be able to see that and be a part of it. So, Atiyana, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you even more for being a part of our government affairs committee, for leading it this year, and for being a part of the C.A.R. Leadership Academy.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you
Thank
again.
you.
And thank you all for joining us. We will see you next time.